Stephanie Van Nguyen, a devoted mother, a woman full of warmth, laughter, and love for her children. To those who knew her, she wasn't just another name. She was the glue that held her small family together. Friends remembered her as kind and selfless, a woman who would put her children before anything else. And yet, behind that bright smile, Stephanie was carrying the kind of pain most people never saw. On a cool evening in April 2002, Stephanie made a decision that would change everything. She buckled her two children, 4-year-old Kristina and 3-year-old John, into her 1997 Nissan Pathfinder, shut the door, and drove away from their home in Delhi Township, Ohio. It wasn't unusual for her to go for a drive with the kids, but this time, she never came back. The disappearance of Stephanie and her children would haunt the community for nearly 2 decades. At first, no one understood what had happened. Calls went unanswered, their home sat empty, with toys still scattered across the floor and dishes left in the sink, as though the family would return at any moment. But they didn't. Days turned into weeks, weeks stretched into months. Stephanie's family and friends put up missing posters across Ohio and beyond. Police scoured highways, riverbanks, and neighborhoods, desperate for any trace of the Pathfinder. Helicopters flew overhead. Dive teams searched waters, but it was as if the SUV had vanished off the face of the earth. The unanswered questions grew heavier with each passing day. Had Stephanie simply driven off to start a new life? Had an accident taken her and her children somewhere no one could find? Or was there something far darker behind their sudden disappearance? For 19 long years, no one knew. The family lived in torment, trapped in a cycle of hope and despair. Every phone call could have been the one. Every knock at the door could have been them walking back in. But nothing ever came. What no one realized at the time was that the truth had been there all along, hidden in silence, waiting beneath the surface of the water. And in the fall of 2021, it finally came to light. When Stephanie Van Nguyen and her children, Kristina and John, vanished in 2002, the world of her family and friends collapsed overnight. Police immediately launched a search. The missing mother and her Pathfinder SUV were entered into databases, alerts were sent out, and the story spread across Ohio. Detectives began piecing together Stephanie's last known movements. Witnesses remembered seeing her driving away that April evening, but after that, nothing. The Pathfinder left no tire tracks, no receipts from gas stations or stores, no sign of activity on her bank accounts. It was as if both the vehicle and the young family had been swallowed whole. Investigators worked with what little they had. A note had been left behind by Stephanie, a heartbreaking message that hinted at the turmoil she had been facing. In it, she expressed sorrow and left instructions that pointed toward the Ohio River. To the people who loved her, it was a chilling confirmation of their worst fears. Authorities searched the riverbanks, hoping to find tire impressions where her SUV may have gone off the road. They deployed divers and sonar in certain stretches, but the river was vast, deep, and unpredictable. Days of searching turned into weeks, then months, with no sign of the Pathfinder. Stephanie's family was left in anguish. The not knowing was the hardest part. Was she truly gone? Could she and the children still be out there, alive, somewhere no one had thought to look? Every year that passed added another layer of torment, another unanswered question. Her case faded from the headlines, but it never faded from the hearts of those who loved her. The children's bedrooms stood as silent reminders of what had been stolen. Birthdays came and went with empty chairs. Holidays passed with 3 missing faces. For nearly 2 decades, the mystery persisted. The Ohio River kept its silence. Investigators moved on to other cases. To the outside world, Stephanie and her children became another unsolved story in a file cabinet, another family swallowed by tragedy. But for those closest to her, time never healed the wound. It only made the silence louder. What no one knew was that the answer to this mystery was not buried in some faraway place. It was right there, hidden beneath the surface, just waiting for the right eyes and the right technology to finally uncover it. And in 2021, those eyes would arrive. For 19 years, the Ohio River held its secret. It had swallowed cars before, claimed lives before, and carried away evidence without ever giving anything back. But in 2021, everything changed. Technology had advanced far beyond what was available in 2002. Sonar imaging, once crude and limited, was now precise enough to scan deep waters with stunning clarity. What divers and police had missed back then could now be revealed with chilling detail. A team of search and recovery specialists took on the case, determined to bring closure to Stephanie Van Nguyen's family. Using high-resolution sonar, they scanned sections of the Ohio River near Aurora, Indiana, the area Stephanie's note had hinted at nearly 2 decades earlier. The images appeared slowly on the sonar screen, grainy at first, then unmistakable. The outline of a vehicle sat at the bottom of the river, resting silently in the depths. Its boxy frame matched the dimensions of a late 90s SUV. Divers were dispatched. The water was dark, heavy with silt, and nearly impossible to navigate. Visibility was measured in inches, not feet. But the divers pressed on, following guidelines, their lights cutting through the murk until they reached it, a Pathfinder. The sight was haunting. Nearly 20 years underwater had left it covered in layers of river decay, but it was still intact. The divers confirmed what the sonar had shown. The missing SUV had finally been found. When word reached Stephanie's surviving family, emotions collided. Relief, dread, grief. After almost 2 decades of sleepless nights, of questions that clawed at them every day, here was the answer. The vehicle Stephanie had driven that night had been here all along, resting quietly beneath the water's surface. Authorities carefully prepared to pull the Pathfinder from its watery grave. Heavy machinery was brought to the riverbank. Straps were fastened around the vehicle. The community gathered in silence, some with tears streaming down their faces, as the SUV finally broke the surface, water pouring from its frame. Inside, the truth of that April night in 2002 was finally revealed. The skeletal remains of Stephanie Van Nguyen were recovered from the vehicle. It was confirmation of what her family had both feared and known deep down in their hearts for years. But as the dust settled, one painful fact became clear. The remains of Kristina and John were not there. The SUV had answered one question, but raised another, one even more heartbreaking. What happened to the children? When the Nissan Pathfinder finally broke the surface of the Ohio River, the scene was silent. Onlookers watched as water cascaded from its battered frame, mud dripping from the undercarriage, moss clinging to the windows. For nearly 20 years, this SUV had been the tomb of a mother who never came home. Investigators moved carefully. Inside, skeletal remains were recovered, later confirmed through dental records and DNA to belong to Stephanie Van Nguyen. For the family, the discovery was crushing and comforting all at once. The nightmare of not knowing where she had gone was over, but the finality of the truth was devastating. her surviving relatives were left with the cruel reality. They had answers for Stephanie, but not for the children. Kristina and John, just 4 and 3 years old when they vanished, were not in the vehicle. Their small bodies were nowhere to be found. The news hit the family like a second tragedy. While they could finally mourn Stephanie properly, they were once again plunged into uncertainty about the fate of her children. Had they been lost to the river, their remains scattered and unrecoverable? Had something else happened before that April night? Every possibility felt like a knife twisting deeper. For nearly 2 decades, the family had lived in the limbo of not knowing. Now that limbo was only partly lifted. They could bury Stephanie, but they had no graves for Kristina and John. At her memorial, family and friends gathered to finally say goodbye. Photographs of Stephanie smiling with her children were placed at the front. Candles flickered, casting shadows that seemed to echo the absence of 2 little ones who should have been there, remembered alongside their mother. The service was heavy with grief, but also with gratitude. Gratitude for those who had never given up on finding Stephanie. Gratitude for closure after years of silence. But no speech, no prayer, no embrace could erase the hollow ache of 2 missing children whose story remained incomplete. For the recovery team, it was a stark reminder of the fragility of their work. Success often came with heartbreak. Finding Stephanie meant closure, yes, but it also meant reopening the deepest wound of all, the unanswered fate of Kristina and John. And so the story, even after 20 years and 1 monumental discovery, was still not finished. Because the question that haunted the family in 2002 was still echoing in 2021. What happened to the children? In the days following the recovery, the story of Stephanie Van Nguyen spread far beyond Ohio. News outlets across the country picked it up, headlines echoing the same haunting truth. After 19 years missing, a mother had finally been found in the depths of the river, but her children were still unaccounted for. For Stephanie's family, the discovery was bittersweet. They could now honor her memory with dignity, finally putting to rest the constant gnawing question of where she was. But for Kristina and John, there were no graves, no answers, no closure, just the endless ache of absence. The community of Delhi Township and surrounding areas mourned alongside them. Vigils were held, candles were lit for 3 lives interrupted, and many asked themselves how a mother's quiet despair could lead to a tragedy that spanned decades. Law enforcement called the case both solved and unsolved. They had located the SUV, recovered Stephanie, and closed a chapter that had haunted investigators for years. Yet the children's whereabouts remained a mystery. Some believed their small remains had simply been carried away by the current, lost forever to the unforgiving waters of the Ohio River. Others held on to a sliver of hope, however faint, that something different had happened, something no one yet understood. For search and recovery teams, this story became a testament to why their work mattered. Technology had caught up with tragedy, giving a family answers that once seemed impossible. It was a reminder that no matter how much time passes, the truth can still be found, even if it's buried beneath years of silence and water. Today, the name Stephanie Van Nguyen carries with it a legacy, a mother whose story reminds us of the devastating weight of mental anguish, the enduring pain of the missing, and the relentless pursuit of truth. But the echo of 2 small voices, Kristina and John, still lingers, unanswered. And that is the heartbreaking reality of this case: closure for one, but not for all. If this story touched you, remember, every view, like, and share helps bring awareness to missing persons everywhere. Subscribe to join us on more journeys as we uncover the hidden truths, the forgotten stories, and the mysteries waiting to be solved. Together, we can keep their memories alive and make sure no one is ever truly forgotten.